Hello, this is Leili Sadaghiani with Integrity Overscale podcast. And of course, our co-host here, Max. Max, thank you for being here today. I'm super excited about the topic.
Me too. This is a really, really good one, and there's so much juice, like so much meat around this whole structural, systematic or systemic thing that we're going to talk about. So I'm really excited for it too.
And for our listeners, what we are talking about today is actually a passion of mine that I just love and I cherish so much. And it's the leadership gap that nobody talks about. It's about gender, it's about power, it's about organizational change. So we are diving into what it's like to be a woman and the history of research having to do with gender leadership. You ready, Max? Let's do
Oh
this.
man, yes, I'm ready, Laylee. Let's go. Let's get into it.
So here is a number that's worth sitting with. Women are earning majority of bachelor's, master's, doctoral degrees in the US, and they are representing nearly half the workforce by almost every traditional measure of readiness. And the pipeline is full, which is amazing when you think about it. But
Hmm.
then there's a misalignment. Women are holding fewer than 10% of Fortune 500 CEO positions. They're occupying just over 20% of board seats. And if you look at the senior executive roles across life science, healthcare, aerospace, industries we work in every day, the numbers are even more stark. So, what's going on? Is this talent
Well,
a problem, right?
yeah, I mean it's definitely a problem. I'll tell you what's going on is that, we're men. We got to control stuff, man. I need to make sure that I'm the top person, right? The top of the food chain. Unfortunately, that's just not the case, and that's not true. And
Mhm.
so yes, I believe that it's a huge problem. And the I don't know. I don't know how to say this without sounding like I'm bashing my own gender, but I found out that women are the superior sex when I witnessed the birthing process and the pregnancy, the whole thing of my ex-wife. I will tell you right now, there is not a man alive that could go through that. That's a different story, though. When we're talking about business and leadership, women have specific talents and the ways that they see things that men don't. There are differences between how men and women operate and think, and that's not me trying to say, you know, labeling and saying you have these roles and you have these roles. I'm saying you can take the same situation and have a man
Mhm.
look at it and a woman look at it and get two equally important and inspirational viewpoints on something. So
Mhm.
basically, as a human society, by doing this, we're just shooting ourselves in the foot over
Mhm.
greed.
I really love that, and it's the answer that I think about a lot, and this is something I also share in my coaching with women and even teaching. I do a lecture on gender leadership, and I say it's not about confidence, it's not about motivation, it's not about talent problem. It's about the perception of people and the leaders that come and sit, if it's a woman or a man, different perceptions make that journey for that person that's sitting in that role. So that's exactly what we're going to talk about from a leadership perspective today and really get into the frameworks of that. Um, Before we dig into the causes, I want to name something that gets missed in these conversations, especially because it's more research based. Researchers didn't even start talking about gender in leadership seriously until the 1970s. And even when they did, and this felt super offensive when I learned about it, the first question that they asked was, can women lead?
Yeah,
Not what barriers are they navigating through, but it was like, can they do it at all?
yeah, yeah. It's
And,
ridiculous.
yeah. And that framing tells you everything you need to know. And we're still dealing with the residue of that too.
Right. Well, and you said, that your fewer than 10% of Fortune 500 CEOs are women. For people and or for CHROs or the VP of people ops or what's the misconception about why those numbers are so low? Like
100%.
what do they say? Like when you ask a powerful man, hey man,
Mhm.
I noticed that you're running these companies and you've got all white male CEOs or black male
Mhm.
CEOs or whatever, but women are more middle managers or different roles. Like why is that? What have you heard or what do they say?
It depends on the person that you're asking to. So if
Mm,
it's someone who has awareness of gender leadership and the segregation of it and all the things that we're talking about today, they will start to notice that they have that awareness. There are individuals that I was lucky enough to be part of a friend of mine's research, and I was helping this person transcribe some of the interviews. And I felt very fortunate to hear some of the men talk about whether they believe that this is exists or not. Some of them were saying, yeah, we've already fixed it. This issue is already done. We don't have any
mm,
issues. And then there were some that were
sure,
complete advocates, Max, and they were very much saying, no, no, this is very visible. We don't give the opportunities. We don't choose the right individuals. It's more of like the masculine, if and I'm putting quote unquote for listeners who
sure,
are not watching it, but it's the masculine traits that are the perception of what leaders should be.
sure.
And
Yeah,
I mean, there's a lot of research on it now that consistently shows that women are equally effective leaders. And
yeah,
some studies even show that they outperform men in certain dimensions, like
of course.
mentoring, right?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. No,
Collaboration.
different skill sets, right? Yeah, just
Absolutely.
different skill sets. Man,
Yeah.
and well, and you I feel like I've probably been in a meeting at a corporate office, and I've probably rambled or sounded like an idiot at meetings before and then gotten more praise than a woman that was in there just killing it,
Yeah.
like on point, great answers, right on top of her game. This was back in the Midwest, believe it or not, though. Out here, I'm in California. It's different. Like, I've like the most places that I worked in corporate, women run the show, even if they're not like CEOs, but women COOs. I think that's great. I think women have a keen ability for business operations, making sure everybody communicates well, things work smoothly.
Mhm.
I think that's something that I see out here a lot. But yeah, I mean, I think it's ridiculous. But I'm curious to know
Mhm.
what measurable capability organizations are leaving on the table by not resolving this gap, right? Like you'd think these guys would be like, well, if we bring more women in and the data suggests that putting them in positions of leadership is going to
Mhm.
increase revenue, increase, do better for the company, why not do that?
Mhm. Really good question, because we want to think about the whole organization contributing to this. Usually, you would get a consultant that comes and says, hey, your HR leaders really need to pay attention to this. But it's really the organization that ignores this. They're not just making a values error, they're making a talent strategy error. You can't optimize for company performance when you're systematically underutilizing your people, specifically half your leadership pipeline. So those two things are incompatible with each other. And what I want to look at with you is to understand this architecture of the gap, even if it's structural or behavioral or cultural. But again, if there's anything the listeners take away from today is the perception of people really makes or breaks a person in a leadership position, if they're man or woman or any
Mm-hmm.
any other pronouns, because I also want to respect the fact that we are a lot more different, and I mean traditionally speaking, than we were 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that that's all culture, cultural. When somebody's like, "Well, the trans thing wasn't a thing 30 years ago," yeah, it was. Just people never talked about it because if they did, they were ostracized.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like everything's a spectrum. It's
Yeah.
everything is on a spectrum. But folks that are into psychology, like you and I, understand that. Folks that are not see things more binary, unfortunately. But hopefully, we'll get there.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I want to share, personal experiences that I've had. I was in a corporate world for a very long time before I started this business, and
Mhm.
I hit a lot of blocks. And my answer, because I felt very lucky enough to have access to getting an MBA and my doctorate, and so things were a lot more visible to me where I didn't question myself or self-doubt myself, even though, I mean, there are going to be instances in time that I did that, but immediately I would notice this block. And
Right.
instead of thinking I need to abide to it and I need to give to that culture, I just felt like, no, 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 that's the wrong answer. I need to bring Layli into this. I need to bring my strengths into this role. And so that's something I really hope that those who are listening to this podcast are resonating with and understanding. You don't need to change yourself for someone. You can be
Yep.
yourself and you can be a leader and shift that culture to something very different.
Yep. I think, that's extremely valid. I unfortunately, like, okay, so for example, I'm in a rock band, and so lots of times, like I've got a bunch of tattoos and I like jewelry, and sometimes I wear the earrings and the street clothes and stuff like
Hmm.
that. But during the day and when I'm working and doing business stuff, I look like this. I keep clean shaven, a little more minimal. I still got a little flash on, in the tattoos, but it's so interesting to me how differently people treat me
Yeah.
out in public when I'm like this, as opposed to just wearing street clothes. Because there is this conception that, well, it's not a thing anymore. Like, people are more accepting. You can be yourself, you can show up as yourself, and it's not like it was.
Hmm.
But I don't think we're quite there yet. I wouldn't go to court in street clothes or with a
Hmm.
beard. I wouldn't go to a job interview in flip flops, even though I live in San Diego. People are doing that, like, and that's actually acceptable. I've been interviewed by CEOs that were literally in t-shirts and backwards hats, and I showed up in a suit. So it happens. But I love, how can a woman not go into a boardroom with a
Hmm.
bunch of men and think, I'm just going to bring myself into this and be myself without being like, it's the boys. I got to talk a
Yeah.
certain way. I got to appease them. I have
Hmm.
to psychologically manipulate them so they view me a certain way, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So what are your thoughts on that? How do you do, because like, even personally, me as a man going into just a foreign place and feeling like I got to act like these people. I can't even imagine what it's like for a woman. I can't even imagine.
Yeah. There was a woman that I interviewed that said this very well, and I think it was because of her circumstances. The specific person served in a boardroom, and when we asked her, "Hey, you are very outspoken. Why is that? What's the safety that you feel in that boardroom?" Her answer was, "I have nothing to lose." And it was because she was financially independent in her career.
Yes.
She had really settled
Yeah.
herself in there. And I say this because I know a lot of people, including myself, we don't feel safe doing that. And so you have to position
No.
yourself since, I mean, even earlier on in your career as a woman, where you start to find the safety pieces to help you when you are in that boardroom, you can speak loud, but it always starts with the awareness that it's happening. And so that's what I want to talk about next, is starting
Yeah.
with understanding the invisible architecture that's in place, because women have to recognize that in order to build that safety net, build their careers, build themselves.
Right.
um yeah.
That's, yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So let's start with a very well-known concept, but I think it's one of those concepts that people don't quite understand. They've heard it, they're like, oh, okay, I kind of get the gist of it. It's the glass ceiling. And
Yep.
this term became super popular in the 80s, and it describes invisible structural barriers that prevent women from reaching top leadership positions. But there's so much more to it. It's more like the characteristics of they're more institutional, they're difficult to identify and prove, and they're remarkably resistant to change. And the
Mm.
most interesting factor, Max, and I think maybe the most instructive, is the ceiling itself. How
Okay.
you can't break that barrier once you know that it's there, this invisible thing that women feel when they walk into a workplace. Yeah.
Very interesting. I'd be curious to know, do does the shoe work, like, can men rise quickly in female dominated professions, or is there a double does it work the same way where, if I'm a man and I'm walking into like an all female executive company, are they going to do the same thing as a female walking into a boardroom of men? I'd be, just curious. But do you know anything
Yeah.
about men getting better positions and higher pay in what would be traditionally considered feminine roles or more female dominated professions?
Oh my gosh, yes. So there's an opposite phenomenon that's called the glass escalator.
Oh my God.
And that's exactly what you're describing. So when men enter female-dominated professions, we know them as nursing, education,
Right.
nonprofit, HR,
Right.
all of those. They rise quickly
Yeah.
into leadership positions. And the stereotypes that work against women in traditionally male spaces now are in favor of men in traditional female spaces.
Yeah. It's all like, yeah, that's, you're right about that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the same bias that's creating a ceiling for women. It's creating an escalator for men, and it's very systematic. But, for us, what's the whole point of this? Why would this matter to someone who's sitting in human resources or
Yep.
someone in
Right.
org change management? Well, it's because it means the bias isn't about individual decisions now. It's baked into how we perceive there's that wonderful word that I love, who belongs
Perception.
in what role. Yeah.
Yeah.
And those are the perceptions that drive promotion decisions, mentorship access, succession planning, whether they're conscious of it or not. And I include you, I include me. We have these perceptions and we have
Yes.
to work through it on a constant.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, you know, there's if you grow up how, I'm 41, think you're what, in your 30s, right?
Yep.
So we're
Yeah.
like similar generation. I'm an elder millennial. But, when I grew up, it was you didn't say no. You didn't
Hmm.
challenge your parents. If it was an authority figure, you did what they told you. Stuff like that. But I'm telling you, Laylee, like my daughter is 9 and this Gen Alpha that are being raised by millennial parents, these
Hmm.
kids are crazy. They do not take shit from anybody. My daughter will not let anybody boss her around.
Hmm.
And that can be difficult for me, but I'm very glad because she has such a backbone that she's going to be the type
Yeah.
that's going to walk into a room with a bunch of men, and if they don't treat her right, she'll just let them know. And if they're like, get out, she'll be like, fine, I don't want to work here anyways, this is ridiculous, I'm going to go all over social media and say what dicks you guys are. You know what I'm saying? Like, because it's an injustice. And
Hmm.
so I feel like this younger generation, that like the kids that are born 2010 to 2020 and even now,
Hmm.
that injustice for them is real. And the
Hmm.
young girls that I see, my daughter and her friends, I mean, these kids, they're going to be okay. They're going to be okay. Hopefully, right? Hopefully, but I don't know. I think, hopefully it's getting better. But if there's a glass elevator
Hmm.
for men in more feminine dominated roles, does that like, I don't know.
Hmm.
Does that throw things off? Is there like mass exoduses of women leaving those roles and inventing their own or trying to get into different fields? Like what does that do to the balance?
You see a lot of women now in more entrepreneurships, which is fantastic. I think that's where you're seeing a lot of shift is that women are entering their own companies, they're in that creating space. And it's because as we start thinking about the architecture of this escalator that we talked about or this glass ceiling, they have hit every complication block to a point where there are actually researchers, Ingley and Carley. They introduced a very accurate metaphor that's so much more complicated than what we're talking about, and it's called the labyrinth. So, leadership advancement for women isn't blocked by one barrier, it's navigating a maze. So, you have multiple obstacles, complex career paths, cultural expectations that are shifting depending on the role that you're in. And this actually resonated with me when I learned about it because My career, I continuously would go through these mazes, and when I was in the corporate world, would hit this specific part and I couldn't go here. So I would change position and company and I would get to a certain part and then I would get blocked and I couldn't go here. And I continuously would move around so I can get to a higher level position because that's ultimately what my goal was, is leadership, what I studied. But this maze was just super complex, and that, again, the awareness of it being there is so important.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree. And since there is, there the whole stigma of like the ball, oh, she's a real ball buster. You've heard this one, right? Like the woman in the boardroom that hangs with the boys is often seen as abrasive and masculine, and oh, she's a B word, right? Like, don't get on
Hmm.
her bad side, boys. She'll have your balls in a vice. You know what I like? You hear all this kind of like banter, kind of back and forth. So
Hmm.
and then that can be damaging too, right? Because that's not true. Like, women aren't being bitchy, they're just being assertive, just like a man.
Hmm.
You would never be like, oh, he's a real ball buster. You know what I mean? So it's really unfair. Like, I've heard this kind of stuff. But what does a organization do to audit and debias that performance?
Hmm.
um you
That's
know bec-
that's the right question. Hmm.
yeah, so let's say there's an organization that knows this is happening, and maybe even there's some of the male leadership is like this, I want change, I want to get have more women in higher roles and make things more equal. How do they go about doing that? Is there, some rich white dude sitting in an office somewhere that controls everything and is just like, no? Or how does
Hmm.
that work?
Hmm. Well, you have to know the root causes first and foremost in the organization. So, what we'll do right now is we'll identify three categories based on research, categories of just factors that are explaining these gaps. Because I want to walk through each one and really understand that from an organizational response, this is what you're seeing and this is what you're dealing with. So, we'll start with the first one, and that's human capital differences. So,
Mm,
our education, work experience, leadership training, career continuity. And the old argument that you'll hear is women have less experience. So we have fewer people that are women in the top. And that's the pipeline problem framing. And it's where
yes.
some of the truth embedded in it, but it's not the truth people think it is. So there's so much more to this story. And that it's because the pipeline isn't empty, it's actually leaking. Women, we talked about women having degrees and then the
Right, right.
misalignment with that. The issue is what happens after. Women disproportionately carry domestic and childcare responsibilities. It's gotten better somewhat today, but it's still happening where you have career interruptions, even temporary ones where re-entry becomes difficult. Now you add the layer of AI in there where people are even having a harder time applying for positions. Now
Oh,
resumes are
it's
supposedly dead,
well,
right?
they are. And I can actually, I can tell you this is certain because before, when before starting corporate, or before starting my company, right? Um, I was looking for job switches. This was a few years ago even, and now it's way worse. But I remember putting out like every day, hundreds of applications, and I would get you get LinkedIn Premium, you can kind of see who's applying for this. There's tools where you can see this. And it was like, thanks for submitting your application. There's 1,300 other applicants for this position. And so, I mean, I was over a decade of corporate marketing experience, proven results, college educated, and I hate to say this, white male, but that is a clear edge that I have in my life that I shouldn't, but I do, and I recognize
Mhm.
it. And still crickets, or hey, we really appreciate it. There's just so many other candidates. We found somebody that's so it's very hard, and I think that experience, you know, or I'm sorry, college education.
Mhm.
I don't think it's as necessary as it was maybe 20, 30 years ago. But most people that I know that don't have a college education, don't shoot me for saying this, but they don't know how to think as well as people that do. And I just think, having a liberal arts education is something that will help anybody, right? Just, and it shows employers that you can stick something through and finish and go all the way. And then there's people like you that are doctors, which is just crazy to me. So that's a different story. But I guess my point is that it is really, really difficult, even with a degree, even with advantages, with AI and all of that. And now you've got these guys, like there's podcasters out there. I don't know if you've ever, you've heard of like these incel guys,
Hmm.
and like the Andrew Tates and the guys
Hmm.
out there that are saying that white men are now being, there's prejudice against us because of equal opportunity, and they didn't hire my husband because he's white, and all of this kind of stuff. And then there's, like this, there's guys out there that are talking about how, you know, um, the government and any college is corrupt, and everybody, women are women are supposed to be performing highest as mothers and taking care of the home. It's all of this stuff, and they're trying to back it up with data too. Like they're trying to get scientific on it, and it's just the most ridiculous stuff that I've ever heard. But some of that I think is like a backlash it currently of even, like nobody being able to really get ahead because of how everything is set up right now. So I know how
Hmm.
I've experienced that, and I have a great life. So I can't even imagine how a woman would experience it, because we do have to remember here that, race and everything aside, women have been the oppressed population, or like for the longest, forever, pretty much, right?
Hmm.
So I don't know.
Yeah.
I guess I was kind of rambling there, but what I was trying to get at is, you know, I don't know, the incongruity is just
Yeah.
crazy, and I don't know how organizations can work to redefine kind of what high potential looks like without pushing, other agendas or pushing effective leadership or things like this. I don't know.
The word education comes to mind. The word that you use, where I think it's so important. I'm seeing the misalignment in all of those factors too. And you add these pieces of perceptions that you're talking about, where men are on podcasts just saying whatever they feel, and the
Yeah,
anger that they feel in the
my
world.
truth. Right.
Yeah, yeah. So these are the perceptions that women are dealing with. And so
Yeah.
it's now becoming harder to come into. Now, I want to add another layer into this, because for human capital purposes, the flexibility arrangements, they also come with invisible penalties in terms of visibility and advancement. And I even have a personal story where I was working for a financial company, and I think I was working from like maybe 6 in the morning, and it was like 6:30 or 7. And I was thinking, well, I need to go home. I need to take care of my household. And I remember going in the restroom and coming out to, wash my hands. And then a colleague of mine saw me and she said, "Leaving early, are we?" And I just took a pause. I had been there for almost 12 hours. And I said, "Well, I need to tend to my people now. I need to go." But the whole night, because of this, and this was a woman telling me this,
Yeah.
I felt super guilty the entire night, and then the
Sure.
rest of the week,
Yeah.
because I had decided, even though I was going home late, to go 12 hours versus the 14 or 15 hours that they wanted me to be there. And this is the flexible arrangement: is if you don't make this commitment, then we're not going to reward you this promotion.
Exactly. When for a man that it would be a different story.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
It's
going,
crazy too. I just want to comment on what you had said.
yeah.
I think my mic was muted there for a second too. So I had said that for a man it would be different, leaving, not working the full 15, but leaving at
Mhm.
12 hours. But I've also seen it gets clicky. There's like the higher level women in corporations who are like the trusted ones, and then they are like harsh on the other women who don't like play the game with the boys. Like if you can't get up
Mhm.
to their level, and that's
Yeah.
what I mean. Like, oh, you want to leave after 12 hours? You're not going to make it here doing that. Like you know what I mean? There's
Yeah.
all, and then there's, it's like high school. You
Yeah.
know, it's like high school cliques in these corporations that are gender based and experience based and perception based. And, you know, this toxic stuff just leaks into these companies and wreaks
Mhm.
havoc. And nobody's able to have an intelligent, open conversation about it without overreacting, you
And
know?
this becomes a company issue again, Max, because when I hear a woman tell me that in the bathroom, this isn't the woman's issue per se. This is what we've been taught as women,
Yep.
that we have to be there for 15 hours. We cannot have a personal life. Oh, but have a personal life because you need to have kids. You need to tend to these things. And so we are
Yeah.
getting mixed messages. And so when we
Yep.
see a woman walking out the door, there are two things that are happening. One, sure, we could be jealous because we wish we were home. Second is we're thinking we're saving this person too. Like, you need to
Yeah.
be here. You need to
Yeah.
give to this masculinity culture because you're expected a certain amount of time
Yep.
before you go home.
Yep.
So
You have to work your life into our system, and you also have to live that double standard where things at home need to be taken care of as well, and you're just going to have to balance all of that out,
yeah,
you know, and make it work, which is hard. And it probably you know, there are women out there that did the corporate thing, or maybe they didn't, and maybe they just want to be at home, maybe they like doing that, maybe that's what they're interested in, and then they catch it too, because there's other women that are like, well, you know, you're worthless, like why don't you get out in the workforce and do what we're doing and, you know, play the game. Or there's some women where you ask, why don't you have kids? That's the Anytime there's a woman that's over 30 that doesn't have kids, oh, you don't have kids, why not?
yeah,
Well, because it's my personal choice not to, and I'm focusing on other things. But then I've never once been asked that. I've never once
mhm,
been at, oh, like, I mean, I do
yeah,
have kids, but before I had my daughter, nobody was like, oh, why don't you have kids yet? You really should start your
yeah.
family, don't you think?
I totally agree to that. I mean, I'm happy to share my age here. I'm 37 years old and I don't have children. And recently I went to a friend's house, and she had just had her child.
Yep.
And I would never, ever in a million years ask someone, are you going to have kids if they don't have kids? Even if they decided that they don't want to be in a relationship and be single for the rest of their life. That's not my business. That is the choice that this person makes. It's the same thing for men, it's the same thing for women.
Sure.
But sitting with this person, she felt comfortable enough to ask me, well, when are you going to have kids?
Yep.
And I thought, wow, that I don't care how long we've known each other. This isn't a question that I'm going to answer.
Yeah.
Um,
And she said when. She didn't say are you. It was already assumed, like, hey, you might be a
yeah,
little behind. When are you gonna get with the program?
yeah. And this is the problem, is this again, perception. This
Mm.
perception that we continuously hit. Um, I know we want to go through the other causes, so I'll go jump into
Yeah.
the second root of the
Yeah.
cause that companies need to deal with. And it's the second root is going to be the gender differences in the style and behavior. So it's research showing women tending to use more transformational leadership behaviors. They're more collaborative in their decision making. They are the mentors. They're developing people. They're more likely to engage in what researchers are calling contingent reward behavior, which is connecting efforts to outcome. And the critical finding here is that these behaviors are objectively effective, and they're still valued less than more traditionally masculine leadership styles.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
So women are equally effective leaders. And actually, research is suggesting that they're more effective in certain dimensions, and they're still rated lower, promoted less, compensated differently. And this is not a style problem, it's more of the evaluation problem. Your performance management system, your promotion criteria in the organization, the 360 feedback process, if they're not explicitly designed to separate behaviors from bias, they're producing bias outcome. Full stop.
Yeah. 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 That's crazy. So maybe I'm just being a nihilist here. I don't know, but the way that you're putting that, and especially with this second root cause, I was going to ask, okay, well, how do you get how do we fix that? But that's not even a core. I mean, this is just literally this is a paternal world. It's a
Yeah.
the men rule the world, and I don't think that at any point we're going to give up that stronghold. I think that we we get better, things go cyclical,
Hmm.
but how are we supposed to reprogram humankind to
Hmm.
be different? I mean, I think it would take just a level of human consciousness to rise
Hmm.
incredibly, and really
Yeah,
really see that just because men and women have different strengths and different things that they do well doesn't mean those don't cross over. Doesn't mean that we can't do the same things just as
exactly.
effectively as the others. There's a little thing called neuroplasticity where I don't know how to knit, but if I sat down and started doing it, guess what? I'd get pretty good, right?
Hmm.
Anybody can do that. Anybody. So
Totally. Totally.
I don't know how we're gonna fix that one. It doesn't seem possible to me. So if you have it, but I think people like you are. We need more Lailis. We need more people like you.
I think it's Max, where we're heading is just having these discussions, and less about taking things personally and more about hearing each other talk. That's what's missing in this world. I mean, even outside of this gender leadership, we are seeing this in the US where we're so divided. I actually had
Oh, it's
um,
insane.
a coaching opportunity where this potential leader was talking to me, and he said, I don't feel like I can have a discussion about what's happening in the world today because people are circling their own perception and perspectives.
Totally.
There's no listening whatsoever.
No,
And I think this is
it's by
where we
design.
need to be. Hmm.
Yeah, I know it's by
Yeah.
design. Just like you said earlier, a lot of men are saying, well, we fixed this, women are making more money, they're entering more masculine roles more often, we're getting better. But a lot of that, I think, is by design. It's okay, well, let's shift and give them this, that'll
Mhm.
quiet this down, and then over here we'll keep doing this, and build other things over here, and then later we'll give them this, and then below that talk about that. But also social media, anybody can say like this whole my truth thing. Well, I'm speaking my truth, and so then that's true to me. And what I feel is my truth is that women don't deserve to make as much money as me, and then they're out there
Mhm.
peddling this garbage on social media, um, and people are listening and they're taking it. Oh, okay, well, hey, I looked at this study and this researcher said this, and it's some guy from Fox News or like whatever, right? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
InfoWars or something. And then you got a whole group of people believing it. And then you've got,
Mhm.
the leader of the US telling everybody that reputable journalists are fake news peddlers,
Mhm.
which
Mhm.
completely destroyed everything, because now how do you know what's true? How do you know what's real?
This is what's really hard for me, Max, as someone who's gotten their doctorate, when people say, oh, there's no need for education. There's no need for education. You can just keep going without it.
So dangerous.
I am noticing that that's what society is saying in social media and other aspect of it. I'm sitting with CEOs. That is not the case.
No, it's not the
I
case.
hear MBA thrown around like this degree needs to be there. I hear to a certain point doctorate. Now, this isn't me saying like experience doesn't matter because that's also a bunch of balonies. Experience really matters.
Sure. Yeah, you can have a piece of paper, but if you're not good at what you do, that'll be screened pretty quickly once you get your job.
Yeah. But I
But
want the
no, you're right.
listeners to know that. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
you're right.
Yeah.
And by the way, when applying with the research I did, what earlier when I said I don't think college is as necessary, I didn't mean don't do it. I meant that there's a lot of Gen Z out there right now that are just hustling on social media, creating
Yeah.
their own businesses. They've figured out a way to make money because of the education that's available online and with AI and all of this. And I went to school for psychology. I have a psychology degree. I run a
Mhm.
marketing agency,
Yeah.
but Part of the reason I started my own is because I don't have an MBA. And when I was
Mhm.
applying for corporate positions, a lot of them wanted to see MBA. And
Yeah.
a lot of them would say, it's great that you have experience. I love that, but we're looking for somebody with specific resume. And I know that meant we want you to have a business degree specifically. So I just started my own instead. So do what I did. If you don't have an MBA, start your own business. It's possible. But yes, no, to your point, absolutely. Absolutely. You need
Yeah.
some form of proof that says, hey, I'm good at what I do, and these people said it and they're reputable. That's always going to be important, right?
Yeah. And if you're taking the route, which I have come to know you very well, so I say this with confidence, is if you are taking this route, don't be that podcaster person that just says bunch of baloney and crazy stuff. Educate yourself.
Yeah.
Think about what you're saying on your podcast. Think about what you
Yes.
are saying as an influencer. Because if you are just saying things, people, if you have 100,000 followers, people are going to believe you. They're
They do.
following you. They're
They
not going to
do.
check you. Most people don't check you. So
Yeah.
be wary of that power and what you're doing, which actually this takes us right into the third root cause, because we kind of talked about it. It's prejudice and stereotypes.
Yep. Yep.
This is where it gets super uncomfortable and where a lot of discussions fall apart because it's not about bad actors, it's about implicit architecture. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Let's
So,
do it.
implicit bias. Research consistently is finding that people unconsciously associate leadership with masculine characteristics. So,
Yep.
this is creating um, what's called a role incongruity. It's a perceived mismatch between women and leadership. So, gender stereotypes are becoming pervasive, well documented, and highly resistant to change. And men are a stereotype as agentic. What does that mean? It means that it's associated with confidence, independence, decisiveness. And then
Yep.
women are stereotyped as communal. So the collaboration, the
Yep.
warmness, the
Yep.
supportiveness, relational. And the problem isn't that women are communal. They're not, by the way, any more consistently than men are. The problem is that communal gets coded as, well, you're not a leader if you're communal. You should go do something that's a little bit more communal in your
Yeah.
position.
Yeah.
And that's the most interesting aspect that you see in org cultures.
It is. And the whole leadership being a male dominated thing by perception, I feel like is very Western.
Mhm.
And it's fairly modern. I mean, if you look back at some of the ancient civilizations, there were lots of queens, women that were in charge of everything. There's, in tribes, in Native American tribes, women held a lot of power. If you look at the animal kingdom, the female lion is the one that goes out and hunts. The male kind of lays on his ass all day, which, that sounds like a good life to me, right? But you can tell the difference between culturalized or intentionally culturalized, civilized, society, because we have to make these labels. You do this, you do that. Traditionally, women do this. Traditionally, men do that. But the reason those prejudices they still exist, but I think that they're being broken apart now because society has to evolve, right? If you have a conservative mindset about your whole entire life, it literally means conserve, keep it the way it is. But
Mhm.
we can't stay the way we are. We're going to naturally evolve. And I'll tell you something that I think will blow your mind, but definitely blow a lot of guys' minds out there. Is I'll tell you what makes you a man is your ability to have masculine energy and feminine energy together. It's like the
Mhm.
yin and yang balance, and it's the same thing for women. There's nothing wrong. Sometimes women need to get into their masculine. Sometimes
Mhm.
men need to get into their feminine. It's not a binary thing. Like we've all got masculine and feminine traits and energy, right?
Yeah.
But it's the fear of letting others know that we feel that way that
Mhm.
makes you scared to speak up, that makes the prejudices and the stereotypes and all of this stuff there. because of the repercussions. And in the society now, yeah, like you can't say anything because you're going to offend somebody or somebody's going to get pissed and then they're going to cancel you or you'll never work in this town again. How dare you speak to me? Like, you know what I mean? Like people can't have discussions, but I truly believe that to be a well-rounded person, whether you're a man or a woman, you need
Mhm.
to have a unity with your feminine and masculine sides and I know plenty of women with masculine traits that would blow me out of a boardroom, right?
Mhm.
Like
Mhm.
my stepmom is a lawyer and she became a judge. She is ruthless. She's ruthless, and she's a top corporate lawyer for a long time, but not everybody is like her. They don't have that personality. So with these stereotypes that are happening, it makes it pretty much impossible to shift. So how do we do that?
Well, we shift with understanding that as much as we want to work on ourselves, a lot of what we're talking about today is the different companies that are in this way toxic. They need to address this. And you shared about your you said stepmom who's a judge, who's
Yeah.
she's herself, right? She's herself.
Yes.
I want to be myself. A lot of women you meet, they want to be in their best self, but women face what researchers are calling cross pressures. They're expected to be communal because gender stereotypes exist, and they're expected to be agentic because leadership expectation says you need to have these masculine traits. So these two sets of expectations are often in direct conflict with each other, and organizations need to understand, are they doing this? This double standard that research has documented so extensively, are do we have this happening in companies? Again, it's mostly the awareness, mostly the perspective. And to your point, is this going to happen easy? No, like
Yeah.
it almost feels impossible, but there's this level of, you need to be committed to this, knowing in your culture that it will take years to get there. There was a really interesting case that it was Ann Hopkins versus Price Waterhouse case, and it's a legal landmark where Hopkins was denied partnership despite outperforming her peers in every metric, and the feedback that she got was to act more feminine, wear makeup, walk more femininely.
Yeah.
And the Supreme
Unbelievable.
Court, I mean, this is 1989, I want to say, but the Supreme Court ruled that this was sex discrimination. And that was 1989.
Yeah.
I want to forward it to today, where I worked with, and I'll just keep this as anonymously as possible. I did work with
Yeah.
someone where they had one of their teams have a feedback session with, it was a man talking about the performance of the woman. And the woman
Hmm.
got frustrated and said, well, if I was a man, you wouldn't say any of this stuff. Now, the man responded with, you're right, I wouldn't. And I was just like, my jaw dropped when I heard that. That
Yeah.
this person's perception is like, yeah, you're right. Yeah, I wouldn't. But
Yep.
here we are.
It's
You're a woman. Yeah.
Yeah, it's wild. So I think when I was going through, some of the research and some of the things that you've sent over and that we've talked about,
Mhm.
um, the research is consistent that structural changes are going to work better than awareness campaigns
Mhm.
around this stuff. So I know, like, what's the evidence based path forward,
Yeah.
if you
Yeah.
will. We're not just talking about this should happen, this should happen, but is there anything that says like, hey, this company made these changes. Here's the data that came back. I'm showing you because you can either continue the way you are or you can get with this program and see how much better everything would work at
Yeah.
the company.
I think definitely now we're ready to talk about it, because we want to say, okay, what do we do with this information?
Yep.
One is name and measure the barrier. You can't address barriers that are invisible. So the first intervention is visibility. Shine that light and don't be afraid of it. This means you can audit your promoting data, like your 360 results, your compensation data. Look at what you have, and Think about what data you're feeding your AI, for instance. Women are doing fine isn't going to be the answer to this question. It could be accurate for some, but it's not correct. Look at your
Yeah.
data by level, by function, and by business unit, and that pattern is going to tell you where the pipeline leaks that we're talking about today are. So that's number
Yep.
one.
Yep. Good.
The second one is structural intervention. So we're not talking about aspirations. For us, research is pretty consistent with this. Good intentions and awareness campaigns don't move numbers. Structural
Yeah.
changes do.
Yeah. Right.
So this
Yep.
means building inclusion into your process. I know this word is a really scary word that we're using today, and it's been negated from some
Inclusion.
companies. Yeah.
Yeah.
But your job description language, your interview panels, your promotion criteria, your succession planning frameworks, when the process itself requires diverse perspectives, if this position requires someone to think differently, does your job description really says anything about that? And it's about sponsorship, not mentorship here. So mentors are going to advise, sponsorship need to advocate. Women are
Mm,
over mentored. I am over
yeah.
mentored. I've
Right.
had probably 10 mentors in my 15 plus years of career. So if you're only building mentorship programs, joke's on you. You're addressing the wrong
Yeah.
gap.
Right. Yep. Yep. That's really good insight. Absolutely.
Yeah. And then third is you need to address the domestic division of labor. Um,
Yeah. Which organizations are
disproportionate.
avoiding, right? A lot of them are avoiding
Exactly.
doing that, right? Yeah.
Exactly. We need to make it structurally easier for both partners to share domestic responsibilities. So that's the third one. The fourth one is develop leaders differently, because we need to understand that leadership development that treats all participants identical will get identical people and ignore the fact that they're navigating different organizational terrain. So
Of
effective
course.
programs need to address what the strengths of your people are rather than this is what
Yeah.
you need to look like. Yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure. For like if somebody comes in, regardless of their sex, if they're like, "Hey, I got a degree in this. I've got my resume. I did well here. I want to be this position, regardless of
Yeah.
if it's masculine or not." Great. The problem is, you know, I don't I don't know how to I don't know. Again, I think a lot of it comes back to greed. I hate to say that, but I think there's just
Yeah.
a lot of, you know, older conservative white guys out there that just don't want to let go, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And maybe this is where we can talk about the fifth element that I want the listeners to understand, and is challenging the evaluation system. Um,
Yes, let's talk about that. How do we do that?
your performance evaluation system is either producing equity or it's producing bias. And there's really no neutral ground here. The question is whether you're deliberately designed this type of evaluation system to separate performance from perception, or whether you've assumed that intent equals outcome. And I want to share a personal story in this because I worked at a consulting firm for some time,
Yeah.
and there were a lot of men in the room. And they loved to hear themselves talk. And this isn't to say like men love to hear themselves talk. This specific crowd really loved to talk. So as a woman, I realize there are so many ideas in a room. It doesn't help if I throw in an idea. It helps that I execute the plan. The way that that came out in the evaluation system for me was you need to talk more. You need to speak up more. And all I could think of was we have enough speakers in
Yeah.
this company.
Yeah.
We don't
Not
need
enough
this.
doers. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
Exactly. And I mean, obviously, less. I don't know. For a man, I feel like less is more. You can get away with saying, no, this is how we're doing it because X, Y, and Z. But with women, if you just say, no, this is how we're doing it, it's X, Y, and Z, it's like, well, why are you being so aggressive? Why don't you explain, like, sugarcoat it
yeah.
more, mitigate it a little more for me, and then ask my permission at least?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's just not the same level of respect, right?
No. And this is also interesting because if you speak to a lot of women, remember the a thing that you said it was like in the middle of our conversation where women are seen as bitches if they are
Yeah.
aggressive or
Yeah,
so
real ball buster, you know, that's what you hear.
we overcompensate the communal
Yes. Yep.
in that situation.
Yep.
So overall, I think we can really close our podcast here and talk about the fact that this isn't a women's issue. It's an organizational performance issue that disproportionately affects women, and it's costing organizations the full benefit of their talent. They are underutilized in terms of population. So I hope this resonates with whoever's listened to it. And the call to action, I think, for listeners is look around, be aware of it. Ask yourself a few questions this week. Where in your promotion process does subjectivity have the most room to operate in? Or when you look at your senior sponsorship relationships, who's advocating for women? And then are you mentoring heavily? And then what would your organization need to believe differently for this to be treated as a performance conversation instead of an equity conversation? And I think those are the calls to action that I would want the listeners to walk away with from this podcast.
Love it. I think those are great. The only thing that I would say is that
Mhm,
I think something very valuable that Leili you could offer young women or even women in their career that are trying to play this game some, practical experience-based strategies on how to navigate this world.
mhm,
I feel like that might be a really cool resource. So I'm going to challenge any women out there if you want to unfortunately you have to strategically learn how to deal with the patriarchy if you want
mhm,
more insight on how to do that. And I'm not talking about manipulation tactics and telling men, oh, you're always right, and then getting slick. I'm talking about how to equal and level yourself up. Then get at Leili on LinkedIn. Check out
mhm.
InVivo Leadership Strategies. But I mean, I'm sure you'd be willing to have a chat with anybody that just was like, hey, this is what I'm dealing with. I'm really trying to increase, advance my career, and I'm having troubles. And I heard that the podcast you were talking about the gender gap, and I'd love to speak with you. So that's what I'll
Love
say.
that.
Reach out. Yeah. Yep.
Mhm. Yeah, I would love that. Yeah.
Cool. And
But
share the podcast and subscribe.
yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
And that too.
This was such a good conversation. Thank you, Max, for always engaging in the discussion. I'm Leili, and Max, thank you again. This is Integrity Over Scale. Live your life in vivo, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.
See ya.